Welcome into Back Porch Sports. My name is Wes Blankenship. This is Back Porch Sports, and it's on the Tackler Media network of work. And I host this show. I also write stuff. John Michaels hosts the A-Town Stomp podcast, a really Falcons-oriented show. And Jason Butt, formerly of The Athletic, has a lot of content coming out in a print form. So you want to subscribe to Tackler Media, and anytime we do something, it'll go straight to your inbox. And just recently, yesterday, I did a interview with Hudson Mason, former Georgia quarterback, current radio personality, sports talk radio here in Atlanta. And we talked about JT Daniels getting immediate eligibility. And we talked about the competition and what it will look like potentially with Jamie Newman. And that brings me to today's show, and really the theme of today's show that I want to tackle, and that is, there is obviously not a guarantee that college football will happen this fall. But while that's the case, there's also not been a no given. And look, I'm aware, I'm not an idiot. I can see that cases are climbing. But it's also important to consider what the people that are making these decisions, what they're doing and what they're saying. And Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, was on Clay Travis was on Clay Travis's show on Outkick the Coverage. And I know he's a divisive figure. I know Clay's gotten a lot wrong about COVID-19. This isn't about Clay. This is about the platform that Clay has and the way it was used for Greg Sankey to go on the show and talk about what the SEC is doing. That's the only information that's relevant to me, and that's the only information that should be relevant to you. As we look at SEC football, what is the commissioner of the SEC thinking and deciding to do? And if you want to know what SEC football could and might look like this fall, watch Major League Baseball as it starts up at the end of the month, because Greg Sankey said on Outkick the Coverage that the way that Major League Baseball handles its business, it's not in a bubble. College football won't be in a bubble. It can't be. Logistically, can't happen. But if you see how Major League Baseball goes, if you see the trajectory of Major League Baseball, that could be a good indicator of how college football, and specifically the minds that are deciding the SEC's trajectory, how they're thinking and how they're going about their business. So consider that. Look up the interview yourself if you want to check it out. And I think if you're hopeful that SEC football could happen this fall, you may like some of what Greg Sankey had to say. None of the programs have a ton of cases at the moment. He said it's close to zero. That's his quote. Not just athletes, but staff as well. So I know there's no bubble. I know those players will come into contact with coaches. They'll come into contact with their family members potentially. They'll come into contact with other people on academic staff on campus. So it's no guarantee that just because cases are low now that they will be this. But also, hey, it's not horrible news. It's not the worst news right now. And that's unfortunately the way we have to operate. But that should be hopeful. Maybe it's hopeful. Maybe in a week it'll be a moot point and it doesn't matter and cases have blown up. We don't know. We don't know how things will look and how things will work, but all I can do is operate and think day by day of what things look like. And as of today, Greg Sankey at least has some facts, not just a feeling, not just emotions, has some facts that SEC football programs are doing their thing, and they're doing okay, and they're hanging in there, and they're working. With that being said, who better to tell us about SEC news and things going on in SEC football than Ryan Brown of WJOX in Birmingham, a radio host in the SEC headquarters city of America. And I wanted to check in with Ryan about SEC football, the pulse of the conference, the pulse of Birmingham, and why we continue to talk about college football as if it's going to happen when many other media members in our industry, sports specific, not just news, but why many other media members in our industry are talking about how college football and sports won't happen and shouldn't happen, Ryan and I will tell you why we don't operate that way and why we present our information and our content in a different way. So here's my conversation with Ryan Brown. Hope you have an open mind about it. If you don't think sports should happen, give it a shot. I know there's no guarantee that'll happen, but I would do it if I were in your shoes. I think that's all we can do, right? Is try to listen to each other and consider things that we might not agree with at face value. Maybe you'll hear what I'm talking about and you'll disagree, and maybe you'll hear what I'm saying and be enlightened. Who knows? Either way, I love you, and I love the SEC, and I hope that we can all stay healthy and stay safe. And we're rolling. Hey, welcome in to Ryan Brown of WJOX, also known as Jocks FM in Birmingham, Alabama. Ryan, thank you for your time today. And obviously, you're right in the heart of SEC country, and this would have been SEC Media Days week in Atlanta. It all originated up in your neck of the woods, though, of course, and you guys know how to do it better than anybody. What are you missing the most about SEC Media Days this week? But also, what carries you through this week when you think about SEC Media Days and how fun that is for this conference?
Yeah, I guess what I'm missing the most this year is, if I'm going to be 100% honest on this, is the first year was in Atlanta. So what was that, Wes? 2 years ago? Is that right? I'm going to go with something like that. Yeah. So my brother lives just outside of Atlanta, and we played golf a lot after my show was over. So my show's over at 10 Central, 11 Eastern. I would be him at random golf courses. So I played like 4 straight days of golf in the afternoon. So I greatly missed that. That was fun. But with the media days itself, it's good seeing people that you really only see at that event, maybe once a year. It just cracks me up, all the coaches come through and they're all tanned and jovial, and they look somewhat rested, and they're all optimistic. I mean, you never, in all the years I've done media days, I've never heard a coach come through and say, I think I'm going to be crappy this year. I'm not looking forward to this at all. So I do miss that. And it was, as soon as it was over, in years past, there were like times when it would end and teams would go right into camp. They moved it up, obviously, so you'd still have that 2-week period. But I think for fans in our area in Birmingham, it was the sign that the season was here. You could tell a difference in the way fans interacted on the show pre-media days and after media days. It was almost like for people, okay, the wait's over, the season is finally here.
Yeah, I remember driving in last summer to Birmingham from Atlanta and hearing you guys on the drive in, and just it adds a level of legitimacy to the season coming. And I think that's the different part about it this year, obviously, is we can talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And for me, missed the opportunity to hear from Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin. And, we got the opportunity to see a little bit of what that might have been like when they were at the courthouse a couple weeks ago and Leach pulled Kiffin's face mask off. But, those are the kind of things that we were looking forward to with, Mike Leach specifically joining the conference. Is the first thing you talk about is seeing him at SEC Media Days, because you can't help but recognize what that would have meant.
Yeah, and that was going to be almost their entrance on the stage, as seeing both those guys. Kiffin had been there once before, but it's been forever ago. But people are in this conference familiar with him from his time in Alabama. But, Leach is so new, and there are going to be a lot of guys that had never had that experience of, going down the rabbit hole of a Mike Leach press conference that could be about anything from his 2-deep roster to Pirates and Key West. And he was on our show one time and had an answer to a question that involved mayonnaise, a trip to the Holy Land, and fishing. It was the 3 most random things. The only one that I can actually remember was part of it was the trip to the Holy Land. I can't remember what the other 2 were, but they were equally random. And, that's just Mike Leach, and that's who he is. And, it would have added an element of spice to this thing we had not had in years past.
Yeah, Mike Leach bingo, right? You just don't know what square you're going to end up covering up. What is the vibe right now in SEC headquarters as it is July 15th and Greg Sankey today was on Outkick the Coverage, speaking on that program about his feeling and what the numbers are showing with testing at SEC programs, and it seems to be really low across the board. Obviously, things could change when students come on campus, however that ends up looking, but for right now, we don't have an answer, but we also don't have a no. So what's the vibe like in Birmingham today?
Well, I think it became increasingly nervous, after the Monday meeting because you kind of saw a different Greg Sankey. That he changed does mean that, he delivered an urgent message, and it was more urgent than any of the messages. He's been on our show a number of times throughout this. He's been very visible. He hasn't gone into hiding, but I don't think the message had ever been as urgent as it was coming out of that athletics director meeting on Monday. That happened right here in our backyard. So, I think fans in Birmingham are going to be aware of it anyway, but I think you're acutely aware of it when it happens in your hometown. And I think a sense of urgency kind of swept over the fan bases, and maybe for the first time, a lot of people thought, okay, this thing is maybe more perilous, maybe more in danger than I had given thought to. And I think some more people got nervous. I've had more and more people look. I mean, you know this, Wes, because you're the same way. You can't go anywhere right now. People asking you the question everywhere I go. I'm playing golf yesterday, and a guy asked me, when I'm playing golf, I'm going to store, somebody asks you in the store. It's everywhere you go. Are we going to have a season? And I don't know the answer to it. I don't know why they're asking me. I don't know the answer to it. But I think more and more after Monday, the people you talk to say, I was a little more optimistic before Commissioner Sankey, seemed to pour some water on it. So I think there's more of a sense of urgency right now from the fans in this area simply because of that.
Yeah, and we just see the news today out of Alabama, the governor announcing that face coverings will be mandatory in public, and that's a pretty sharp shift from a couple weeks ago. I think she said that there was no way to enforce it, but to your point, when college football becomes part of the equation, I think it's easy for people outside of this region to poke fun at that and say, oh, well, it was college football that was necessary to create this change. But if you live here, you understand that that's not a joke.
No. And if you live Atlanta is a bigger town, obviously, than Birmingham, but Birmingham is a good size of town for what I'm about to say to be true. And this would sound crazy to people that aren't Southern and didn't grow up around this culture. But the economy in Birmingham is better because of football. So people go out more during football season. Now, Saturdays, the economy dries right up because everybody's either at a game or at home. But people go to restaurants more, especially if their team is winning. The economy is better in Birmingham when Alabama and Auburn are both winning. And, I know that sounds insane to people, but it's true. People feel better. So many people invest so much of their emotion and self-worth in this, for right or wrong. People feel better about themselves when their team is winning. And, they might be more willing to go out for a celebratory dinner or, maybe even buy a car. I know that sounds insane, but if you're not from the South, you don't get that. And it's the way it is. So, I do think it's beyond just football. I think our economy in Birmingham and in Alabama and in a lot of deep South towns, and Atlanta included, I would imagine, even as big as it is, and Nashville, even as big as it is, but it needs football. The economy needs it. And I'm not saying you should just do it because of that. Health be damned. I'm not saying that. But I am saying it's important to go through every step that is necessary to make sure football happens, because I think it's important just beyond seeing guys run around on the field for our entertainment.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, too. And to echo that, Ed Ogeron yesterday, Vice President Pence was in Baton Rouge, I believe, and Ed Ogeron said exactly what you just said. We need football. That community needs it. Other college football communities need it. And, this is the most political I've really ever gotten on this show, but you can't help but understand how important it is and where these lines are overlapping right now. And and there are some big decisions that need to be made at state levels to make some of these things possible. But you bring up the point of addressing it with your platform, and I'm thinking the same way. And right now, Twitter is one of those platforms. Your radio show is one of those platforms, and it is easy to scoff at the idea of sports happening right now. But our jobs depend on sports, right?
Sure.
And there is a line that we have to walk right now of identifying that this is a real thing. This pandemic is real, and people's lives are affected by it. But also, neither one of us are epidemiologists, and I think there is a need to not ignore the challenges that sports have in coming back. But our jobs are to talk about sports, and I think one of the most discouraging thing on one side that I've seen is anytime I share a sports story that acknowledges that there are some real sports storylines that could be happening. Like, for instance, here in Georgia, it's JT Daniels getting his immediate eligibility, right?
Right.
With that story, if I don't share that, or if I talk about what the competition could mean for Jamie Newman, I immediately hear we're not going to have a season from someone that also isn't an expert. It's just like, look, dude, what do you want me to do? Because if I go on the other side and I talk about how doomed the season is, well, that's not my place to talk about that. But talking about quarterbacks is. And I think that's what people don't understand.
Yeah, and this goes a lot deeper even than this current time. The two guys, Jim Dunaway and Lance Taylor, I do the show with, our producer Rockstar. We've been together. Rockstar is not his Christian name, but it's his nickname. We've been together since 2010. So, we're in year 11 now. And our theory in doing a show all along is people tune into our show. And Wes, they look at your content on Twitter, they read your stuff, I think, primarily as an escape from all the crap that's going on in the world. Right? I mean, if I want to break down on President Trump's presidency or Joe Biden's viability as a candidate, I got a million places I can get that. And if I want it, I can go seek it, and I really don't have to look how hard, and I can find it. And I can even find it distributed in a manner that fits my political ideology, no matter what my political ideology is. There's enough of it out there. So I can find that. I think people look at us as an escape, and they want to get in their car in the morning with us, and they want to have some laughs on the way to work. They want to get caught up on what's going on with Alabama and Auburn. What they don't want to hear is me going on there saying, as an Alabama or Auburn fan, guess what? Your favorite part of the year is not going to happen, and you need to feel selfish for wanting it to happen. They don't want to hear that. And even if I felt that way, and I don't, but even if I felt that way, it'd be stupid for me to say it because I like making a living. But beyond that, it's stupid for me to give that to them because it's not what they're looking for. My job as a host of our radio show is to give people what they're looking for. Now, we can't please everybody, but we try to please as many people as we can. So that's what I'm going to do. And you know what they're looking for? They're looking for an escape. There's enough places where you can get the crap. They want an escape, and that's what we're trying to give them.
That's exactly where my headspace is right now. And it simplifies my job. It simplifies your job when you operate with that understanding. Let's talk about college football with the assumption that in some way, shape, or form it'll happen. I did see that your SEC Media Day conference division rankings, you posted those on Twitter. If we did have SEC Media Days, that's how you would have voted. Just take me through your mindset on who you got in the East and in the West.
Well, the East, I think, is a little bit easier, obviously, but I think the West, what complicates it is I do think Alabama wins the West. But I think after that, you've got Auburn, Texas A&M, and LSU that are really difficult for me to separate. LSU lost so much, including both coordinators. To me, it's just going to be so difficult for them to fill all those gaps in a way necessary to win the West. And I think even, you look at last year, as good a team as they had, Auburn played them closer than anyone. And that game is back in Auburn, so it's not going to shock me at all if Auburn is a favorite in that game and wins that game. I personally am not buying into this Texas A&M hype. I will say this though: if Texas A&M can beat Auburn, I don't have it in front of me, but I think that's like week 6 or 7. It's right after Auburn plays Georgia. They get Texas A&M, and it's A&M could be, I think, legitimately, even if the schedule remains the way it currently is set, I think A&M could be undefeated coming into that game, and it's a huge game. But I think Auburn's done pretty well against Texas A&M historically, and I'm just not buying into this Kellen Mond's going to take this next huge step. I think Kellen Mond kind of is who he is under Jimbo Fisher, and he's a guy that's good enough to win you a few games, but he's not good enough to win you the big games. So I like Auburn to finish in front of both LSU and Texas A&M. But truth be told, I think those teams are about the same. I think they're going to be about the same, and you wouldn't have to twist my arm too hard for me to move A&M or LSU up in front of that group.
Depending on how the schedule does shake out, a Georgia at Alabama week 1 matchup has been kicked around, and man, that really does light my fire just to think about potentially opening the season with that, and then if your predictions shake out, ending the season with that in Atlanta if they're able to work that out. Ryan Brown of Jocks FM out of Birmingham, I appreciate your look at the SEC schedule as it shakes out and your thoughts on our role in the media right now. It's tough. It's a tough place to be, but you're staying positive. I'm staying positive, all things considered. There's enough resources out there to get you down and take you back down to earth, but I think our jobs are what they are for a reason, and we had to do our jobs. My last question for you, I've got a heart for high school football here in the South. What are you hearing as far as Alabama is concerned with high school football? Is there a plan in action there, or is it kind of sitting and waiting at the moment?
I think it's sitting and waiting. I mean, they are committed to pulling off the season in some form or fashion, and that season in the state of Alabama, I don't know when it starts in Georgia, but it starts generally the 3rd week of August in the state of Alabama. So, we're as you and I talk now, we're about a month out. So there are going to be some hard decisions that have to be made over the next couple of weeks. I've always thought that high school football was going to be the most challenging in all of this. You just don't have the resources that the SEC or the NFL have. It's just going to be a challenge. That's going to be a huge, huge challenge. And it hits me personally. My daughter, I've got 2 daughters. My 15-year-old is a member of the dance line at the local school. So she's asking me all the time what's going to happen because she wants to, do their halftime performances. So, I just do not know. But to me, the high school one, West, is going to be the hardest one to pull off. They just don't have the testing capabilities. They don't have the budgets. So I am more worried about that one than I am the SEC and the NFL for sure. But as of right now, it is business as usual with the Alabama High School Athletic Association. They have not announced anything different. But, I would imagine over the next 2 weeks, those tough decisions have to be made because these schools have to know how to plan going forward.
Yeah, no doubt. And you mentioned the budgetary restrictions and the number of players involved is just the domino effects down the line for years to come are things that we can't really predict. But it's tough. It's tough to think about the ramifications of that, and just hope that in some way, shape, or form, they can make that right. But I saw a high school coach today out of Indiana saying, my sport is different. My athletes can't go play rec football to get their fix in their senior seasons. They can't stay distance and play golf. If they don't play this year, that's it. And that's one of the toughest part of sports is not being able to choose when your last day is, when your last game is, when your last practice is. So that's a tough note. That's a tough note to end on for high school news, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, it is. Because, in college, you could see if they don't have a season, the NCAA could address extra eligibility. And in the NFL, for a lot of those guys, it will just, if they didn't play, it would extend their career another year. In high school, that's it, man. I mean, there's no coming back. So that's the one, that's tough. It's tough on those guys that have all waited on a senior season. And it might have been the difference that senior season and them getting a college scholarship or not. And that's a tough pill for those guys to swallow. And, boy, you just hate it for them because it's by no fault of their own. It's nothing they've done. It's just circumstances that are out of our control.
I got to imagine, too, a guy like Nick Saban is really just at a loss right now. I can picture him throwing his hands up, not knowing what to do with recruiting. I mean, that impacts his program just as much.
Yeah. Yeah. He hasn't stopped. He's been on a heater. He's been on a heater lately.
Yeah, he has been.
Yeah, so he has not stopped recruiting, but it's got to be a different world because you can't do the in-person visits. You got to embrace technology way more than you used to. So everything is just amazing. Everything you think about has been affected in some way by this. And I think, obviously college football recruiting has to be chief among those things because you depend so much on that personal contact, and that personal contact is in a lot of ways off the table right now.
Yep, indeed. Well, Ryan, thank you again for your time, and certainly send the best to your family with high schoolers in the home. And hope that y'all at least have a little bit of relief there at some point this fall to have some peace on the home front, and hopefully enable your kids to enjoy everything that high school has to offer. And these are tough times to think about that, but pulling for them, pulling for other high schoolers and other students across the country to see something that resembles some sense of normalcy. As you mentioned too on Twitter, college athletes, I think they have an opportunity to be safer and have more regulations on campus than they would if they were stuck at home. But follow along with Ryan on Twitter. How can people find you on there? What's your handle?
It's very easy, at Ryan Brown WJOX, at Ryan Brown WJOX on Twitter and Instagram. And you might get some food photos, you might get some golf course photos, you get some snark, and occasionally something that's useful. So, just understand that going in if you want to follow along. That's what you're going to get.
I did see that you answered a question about colored golf balls versus white golf balls, and you can't play with the neons. And I got to tell you, man, I started playing with the yellows recently, and that highlighter yellow just kind of stands out. I think I'm converting myself.
You know what, Wes? There's supposedly studies that show that it improves your focus. That because of the color of it, you focus on the ball better than if it's a white ball. I don't know that I totally buy into that, but that's, I think, one of the selling points behind those. So maybe you focus better. Maybe I should try that.
It doesn't make me hit it better. I can testify to that.
Then I'm not going to bother.
Ryan, thank you so much, man, and hopefully we'll see some good news at some point this fall. That's all we can hope for, man. But take it easy.
Wes.
Take it easy, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, it's been an honor, and congrats on Tackler Media. I look forward to what you guys are going to do, man. I'm very excited for you.
It's either a really dumb or a really bold decision to start a sports startup in a sports drought, but we will see. Time will tell. Thank you, my man. I'll catch you next time. Bye. All right, that was a great chat with Ryan, and I appreciate you listening to it. Thank you for subscribing to Tackler Media. We're doing our best. Like I said, it's a wild time to embark upon a sports startup. You think I don't think about it every single day? I do. But I'm a storyteller, and I make videos, and I talk to people about sports. And until I have a legitimate reason not to, that's what I'm going to do. So I hope you all have a great weekend, and I hope you make it great for somebody else. And I hope we see some ball this fall, y'all. Take it easy.